All right, for 2021, I'd like to call this Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting to order. So this meeting is being held electronically as per section 19.1 of the town's procedure bylaw number 6228-19 as amended due to the COVID-19 situation. May I please have a motion to approve the revised agenda as circulated by Legislative Services?
Matthew.
Thanks, Matthew. And a second?
Joanne.
Thanks, Joanne. Are there any questions or comments on the agenda? Okay, I'll call the vote then. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Any opposed? Okay, that carries. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Okay, so we have no declarations this evening. Okay, receipt of the minutes. May I please have a motion to receive the meeting minutes of March 10th, 2021?
Matthew.
Thanks, Matthew. Second?
Joanne.
Thanks, Joanne. Are there any questions or comments on the minutes? Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Okay, that carries. Okay, for delegations, we have no delegations this evening. All right, so on to our matters for consideration. Item 6.1. We first have a presentation by Kim Clark of Gazelle and Company and Aaron Serencia, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, manager for Neighborhood Network. Matt, would you like to make the introductions?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to give everyone a very quick, brief background on what the project is. So the Engaged and Inclusive project was originally received at the General Committee meeting on November 5th in 2019. So we're approaching on the 2-year mark, but we're still about a year and a half into this, where we both had, as Rochelle was mentioning, Ms. Clark and Ms. Serencia, who is from Magna International, where they presented an overview of a collaborative project that gives an opportunity for ourselves, the municipality, the town of Aurora, East Gwillimbury and Newmarket to kind of create an engaged, inclusive and connected community project, including Magna International in there. And so the project is really kind of on focusing to find shared challenges and opportunities between all of the communities and finding an integrated approach where we can kind of avoid duplication between all of the individual communities. And so without further ado, I will pass the screen over to Ms. Clark, who I believe will be leading the presentation. And so I will unshare my screen and then Ms. Clark, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Sorry, I guess it helps if I'm unmuted. Thank you very much for the opportunity this evening. I didn't know, Matt, I think we also wanted to have an opportunity for Erin to introduce herself. Will she be able to do that if she?
Yeah, absolutely. You're both welcome to.
Okay, perfect. So thank you for the opportunity and the introduction, Matt. As you mentioned, it is a collaborative project with the 3 municipalities, and Neighborhood Network is the community partner lead, which the incredible work that they do in the community, it's just a really natural fit for them to do the work and really drive a lot of the action behind this. And it's a great gift for me being local to the area and having grown up in the area to be able to do this work with the 3 municipalities and Neighborhood Network. So if I could just pass it over to Erin, and she'll share a little bit more about Neighborhood Network and the project. And I will also just point out that you can see, if you see feet behind me, it is my daughter. So apologies if there's any distraction there, but really thrilled to be here. Erin?
Thank you, Kim, and thank you, Matt. And before I start, I just want to give a shout out to Matthew, who is a Neighborhood Network Give Back Awards recipient from a few years ago, which is so nice to see. So very quickly, because Kim is really, the person that you need to hear from tonight, but just very quickly, Neighborhood Network is, as Matt said, actually a division of Magna International. And I have the best job at Magna because it's really my role to help Magna with their community engagement and their support of charities and philanthropies at a really really hyper local York Region level. So in other words, I get to help spend Magna's money on charity. And one of the things that Magna really believes in as part of their charitable and social giving is neighborhood network and finding ways to connect volunteers to local charities in need. So we work with almost 500 different charities, nonprofits, and community groups from across York Region, and over 14,000 volunteers, some of whom were high school students, but it really ranges in age. And we work to help match those volunteers to the charities that are in need. And then we run lots of other community engagement programs. And this is really how our work with Kim began. In support of the charities that we work with, Kim helped us to run a workshop for about 50 local charities. And we were talking about how do we engage with diverse volunteer groups, recognizing that our people in our communities, the demographics are changing. And so we wanted to make sure we were really being inclusive and engaging with everyone in the community. And Kim hosted a wonderful workshop for us. It was so well received, but as an organization, it left us saying, okay, we need to do more. We are, we've had 10 plus years of service in the community here in Aurora. We've done great work, and this is a real opportunity for us to learn and grow and only enhance what we're doing to be even more inclusive. So that kind of spearheaded this conversation with Kim. And if you're from Aurora, if you live or work in Aurora, you know that the boundaries with Newmarket are quite fluid. And similarly, if you're in Newmarket, you're going into East Gwillimbury as well. So as a pilot for this initiative, when thinking the region is so broad, we thought really these 3 municipalities were great for us to focus on. And so that's, as Matt said, and as you'll hear from Kim, was kind of our kickoff to the Engaged Inclusive Communities Project. Very happy to be here. Thank you so much for having us. And with that, I'll turn it back to Kim.
Again, thank you so much, Erin, for adding that and for taking such a leadership role and helping to push this forward. So I'm going to share my screen. Bear with me for a quick moment to make sure that I get the right presentation up. There we go. Can everybody see my presentation?
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. And so I'm just going to go through a few slides. To be honest, it's really more of a guide for me to guide the conversation. But as we said, this is a really exciting opportunity about really thinking about, from a municipality perspective, but also community-based organizations and the network that Neighborhood Network works with. How can we best connect and engage in an inclusive lens, and really thinking about how are we potentially identifying barriers to access to engage in different ways. And so that's really what the focus of this project is. And this is just a quote that is from an organization. It's a great organization that's focused on inclusion kind of through the lens of migration and immigration, but they're really talking about the point that, it's really beyond just a good thing to do, but that if we're inclusive and having diversity in our communities, it really does drive economic and physical resilience. And, it just creates opportunity for community building and community rebuilding. And this is, borne out in so many different ways we see this. And there's a lot of great work that's already happening in our communities. And so this is really to identify some of that and then look for other opportunities to do more. And so why are we doing this? As Erin mentioned, we went on this journey a few years ago, and we realized that the first thing we realized is that from a data perspective, we could find things that were about York Region at a real high level. But when you think about the southern 3 communities of Vaughan and Markham and Richmond Hill, the makeup of that community is very different than it is up here. And so we just thought it would be really interesting to be able to take a look and see what our communities look like up here. So we didn't see at least a snapshot of what that specific data looks like. We knew that our communities are changing on so many different levels, where we're thinking about, cultural, age, when we're thinking about different abilities. There's all different aspects in way things are changing, and the way we need to adapt how we're engaging in a meaningful way with our communities. And so it's really about figuring out how to engage. We're already engaging in many ways through an inclusive lens, but how do we do that? And one of the ways is to gain a better understanding of our communities, and it creates an opportunity for growth and real opportunity to connect. And so again, why we want to engage more effectively. If we understand and we're engaging more effectively, hopefully we can inform our program and policy development to be more reflective of the needs and the changing face of our community. We want to ensure that our communications and how we're engaging and how we're sharing is inclusive. And we also want to make sure that we have that deeper connection, and all of this starts to lead to a bigger sense of belonging, and also encourages that, again, growth and opportunity for economic development and that sense of belonging again. And so what is the program? As both Matt and Aaron highlighted, it is a collaborative project, and it's focused on understanding our communities more and to look at it through an inclusive engagement lens. It's the 3 communities and Neighborhood Network as a partner, and I'm kind of facilitating the work as a project lead. And the reason, again, we live, work, and play. Our borders are porous, and there's a lot of similarities between our 3 communities. So it was a great opportunity to think of it through that with those 3 partnerships. And so at the end of it, when we talk about what is it going to provide to us, it will be a summary report, and we're looking at, one, having a snapshot, but we're also wanting to find and perhaps identify ways that there's collaborative opportunities to work together. And while we are looking at it a big picture, we are also thinking about what are specific needs that may be identified for each individual of the 3 communities. And so the work has been kind of split out into 3 different areas. And the first is going to be a community snapshot. So similar to the York region, what if we were 100, a community of 100, but taking different lenses to our community to understand a little bit more for this kind of subset of York region. What is that makeup? The next piece is we have had conversation and a bit of a document review to take a look at what is the great work that's already happening in some of the municipalities in these spaces, and in these committees that you're involved with, identify some promising practice and some success that's been having. And also, is there an opportunity to look at some gaps that may be in place and some opportunities that present themselves? There's also the chance to perhaps look beyond our borders as well and see if there are some promising practice happening there. The other piece of work that is happening, and sorry, if I just go back to the municipal action, what we've done through that process is we've actually had conversations across the 3 municipalities with departments that are connecting and engaging with community, whether it's communications, planning, recreation, culture. And we've had this conversation about how are they engaging, and then exploring how they're doing it through an inclusive lens and where may some opportunities be. And then we've been going out, and this is the stage that we're in right now and wrapping up, which is talking to community-based organizations and speaking to some community leaders, again, with the lens of different aspects of the makeup of our community, but wanting to, through that perspective, get a sense of how are they engaging themselves as an organization, and what are some best practices that they have, but also where may be some of the ways that they are engaging with municipalities, and have there been barriers or things that we could be considering to be more inclusive in our engagement. We are also working on how do we collect some information around some organizations and stakeholders, so that when the municipalities or other organizations are wanting to engage with different communities, having some potential partner organizations to work with is a great opportunity. So where we are, that's very high level of what the project is. Where we're at right now is we're just finalizing some of our interviews. We're presenting to committees like yours to one, answer any questions. It's a great opportunity to get some really interesting insight, or maybe some nudges of some other organizations that we could potentially speak to. But that's all with the hopes of in the next few months having a report completed and opportunities to next few months. I guess it's really next 2 months now, next month or into May and June, depending on when those opportunities present themselves, to present to council and have a report. And this report will, have that snapshot, but it will also have some identified kind of opportunities for exploration. It's not necessarily an action plan or a path to work ahead, but kind of a foundation to build on. We're really hoping that from this, there will be ongoing kind of engagement and some action opportunity to come, but then also that in a next phase that we will engage more broadly with community around some of the themes that have been identified. So that is the presentation that I pulled together. I am just trying to stop sharing. So there we are. So thank you so much for listening. I don't know how much time or what the process is for asking questions or input or thoughts. I'm open to, because I think that really the best part of this project is hearing from people in the community, and you are doing such great work as a part of a committed committee for the town. So we'd love to hear any thoughts or questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Kim, and also Aaron, for that presentation. That was great. So I'm going to put can I get a motion to put this item forward for discussion?
Matthew.
Thank you, Matthew. And a second?
Haley.
Thanks, Haley. Okay, so does the committee have any questions for either Kim or Aaron about this initiative?
I have a question. Oh, what are the themes that you've noticed?
So there's a few that have come out, and I think it's interesting. It's almost as a mirror reflection from the municipal conversation and the community. And one of them has been about meeting people where they are. And what we mean by that is in a lot of different ways, right? So meeting people where they physically are, meeting people perhaps where they're at from a technology perspective, an ability perspective, all aspects of it. But I think part of the thinking is often as organizations, we expect people to come to us, right? And so how can we maybe work through community and find opportunities to meet people where they are? So an example of that is if we have a job posting as an organization or as a municipality, we post it on our website, maybe we post it to a couple of job boards, but what opportunities are there to maybe with community-based organizations to actually share that more broadly within their communities? Instead of just posting it to our social media, could we possibly post it on their social media and have it shared there? Another example was from a planning perspective. We hold town halls or we'll hold kind of events, but if we do have things are going, can we reimagine how and what those opportunities are? So if people are getting together on the weekend in a park, what about having, something set up in a park every weekend to get feedback and input? So that's one piece of it. The other piece is thinking about how often, and I think, from an accessibility perspective, some of it can be very formal and legislative, but often in the world of kind of inclusion and diversity work, it sometimes isn't formalized into systems and structures, right? And so how do we make some of the things that are informal or perhaps a personal choice to do something more formalized? That was one of them. And then I think the other one is being clear in the communication of this as a priority, and what does that mean? On the side from community as well, some pieces around access, and I think that sometimes that is around physical access, but also it is about kind of what voices are around tables and those sorts of things. So and in all of those themes that have come up, there have been both really great examples of how municipalities or organizations are working to find solutions to some of those. And then there's places where there's really great stories of some challenges and barriers.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Kim, it might be better just in respects of the committee. I might read it out to you separately. I'm actually a social worker.
Perfect.
And I have done through my master's some studying in community and all of that. And I have kind of the accessibility lens and mental health lens and a whole bunch of different ways of looking. So I might reach out to you just separately out of this because I think I might be able to bring some different perspectives and questions from studying, because part of our communities class was to study our home area.
Yeah.
But I could take it far beyond just the accessibility lens. So I'll reach out to you separately to do that versus voicing my opinion in this kind of area.
Yeah, no, I would love that. And I don't know the kind of formal mechanism to get connected to me, but Matt has all of my information. And that's one of the things that we've hoped could come out of this is other people to have some conversations with. So thank you for that. I look forward to that.
Kim, I just have a quick question, and I apologize if this is something that you touched on and I just missed it. So you mentioned that it was going to be a summary report, and I was just wondering when I heard that, is that something that the general public would have access to, or how is that sort of going to be disseminated, or else is it sort of an internal kind of document? I'm just hoping maybe you could just clarify that for me.
Sure, I can jump in with my kind of knowledge of it, but Matt or others that are more familiar with kind of how things roll within a municipality can probably add some input. But it is kind of a report that is being presented to council, but my understanding is that it is at that point public, but the intention of it and what we're hoping we'll be able to do through Neighborhood Network is find ways to share the information outside of that, right? And so there'll be pieces of it that will be, whether it's through some presentations to other Neighborhood Network community groups, that sort of thing, and kind of thinking about what the communication plan is. As far as, what the report is and any potential actions or how it fits into already existing work that's happening within municipalities, each of the municipalities would kind of determine how best that would kind of knit through the work that they're doing and how that's being communicated out. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments for either Kim or Aaron? Okay, doesn't seem like it, but again, thank you both so very much for the presentation. Gave us a lot to think about, definitely. So if there are no further questions or comments, I will call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh, sorry. Any opposed? Okay, that carries. Okay, so now, Matt, you wanted to move item 6.7 now, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So before we do, Kim and Aaron, thank you very much for your presentations today. And then I know Haley was mentioning she wants to connect with you guys. So I've taken note of that and I will get you guys connected sometime tomorrow for sure.
Great.
So thank you again.
Thanks so much for having us. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Take care.
Thank you.
Perfect. And then, yes, Madam Chair, we have Lisa here from the Planning and Development Department. And so just to respect her time, we'd like to move item 6.7 up on the agenda. So that way she's able to speak to the Yonge Street on-street parking plan that's been developed by the town of Aurora and is looking just for feedback from the Accessibility Advisory Committee.
Okay, so just to get general consent from everyone, can I get a motion to put that change in effect and move this item up for discussion?
Matthew.
Thanks, Matthew. And a second?
John.
Oh, I heard like 5 names there. I heard John. Okay, so I'll just say John. Thank you. Okay, so I'll call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Was that everyone? Thank you. All right, so are there any opposed? Perfect. Okay, so the motion carries, and Matt, I'll let you sort of take the lead on this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll pass it along to Lisa. Lisa wrote the memorandum, so she can speak to it, and then we can kind of go from there. So Lisa, the stage is yours.
Perfect, thank you. All right, well, thank you. I appreciate sliding in on your agenda and accommodating. Things are moving quite quickly, and I've started with the town in January as manager of economic development and policy, and it feels like I have been drinking from a fire hose since I started, so I appreciate you letting me slide in tonight. So the purpose for tonight is to bring forward a plan for on-street pavement markings for the downtown, in particular a stretch along Yonge Street. And I'll give a little bit of background of where this is coming from. Back in October 2019, a report went to council about a streetscape plan as part of a promenade plan. So that was towards the end of 2019, and we know what happened in 2020, and quite a few things were then put on the back burner. So COVID really slowed some of the pieces down. So when I started then, there was some discussion about, do we have patios on Yonge Street this summer to help downtown businesses, and how do we help them revive and attract people to the downtown? And internally, we took that discussion very seriously, and there was a lot of questions and a lot of work that would need to be done, in particular bringing it to this group and how we would make those patios not only safe but accessible. And it became a really long conversation, and I didn't want to rush it, and we came up with some other ideas. The economic development board for Aurora has a downtown committee, and towards the middle, I believe, of last year, they had brought forward an idea to remark the parking spaces along Yonge Street. I drove downtown twice now, and just tried to see how traffic flows through there, and it was great. I took my life in my own hands, I can tell you. When I was driving, I was tooted at no less than 3 times, and I was slowing down in the right-hand lane. Now it's fully legal to park there, but people don't realize that you can. So as soon as you start slowing down, you start hearing the horns. So that raised a flag for sure. And I said, do we really want to put patios out here on this highway? It was crazy. So the thinking then was on the on-street parking, twofold for this summer, is to slow traffic down in that particular area, and also to let visitors and residents know where the actual parking is on the streets, and to identify as many parking spaces as we can in that downtown core. And I say for the summer, the markings will stay obviously longer, as long as they last. The temporary piece that I'm asking for internally is to remove the restrictions for rush hour traffic. So people would be able to park there all day and not have to move through rush hour. Again, 2 reasons for that. One is it makes it a lot safer and slows traffic through there. But also it helps to revive and help people stay downtown, and they don't have to worry about leaving during the rush hour. The convenient part, if there is anything convenient about COVID, is that we're anticipating there would be less traffic through there this summer anyway. So we'll try it this summer. So the pieces that I brought forward tonight, and thank you for putting those up, our engineering and operations team have identified a variety of parking spaces and where they would, based on our standards for parking space. And the question we have for this group is the number of accessible parking spaces that we would require, and the best location, and the best people to ask would be this group. So we wanted to bring that forward. And again, I appreciate you letting us come in. We want to try to get this done over the next few weeks. So really we need to confirm some parking spaces. So we'll get to that in 2 seconds. The other piece to it while we're talking is the signage along the stretch that we've proposed would be covered with a temporary signage over the current parking. So it would remove those restrictions, but also welcome people to the downtown. So what I submit is what the BIA had proposed as signage, and we can discuss it. There's a few issues that I spotted spot on, so I'm totally open to criticism on the signage piece. And I'll take back any feedback on that and how we can make those signage more visible and more accessible. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and see what kind of discussion we have on that. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Lisa. And just to keep the committee organized, let's start off with the parking specifically, and then we can move on to the signage just because we have different photos to kind of go through. And so just as background as well for the committee, currently there is one spot on Mosley Street, which is the next photo that I can show you momentarily, that we do currently have as an on-street barrier-free parking spot. As you guys know, and you have seen through our project through Library Square, we do have on-street parking already going in on Church Street and Victoria Street for the library in safer locations. And then the last piece I'll finalize before we kind of have the discussion going in. I know we've talked about Yonge Street as being a potential for on-street parking in the past. Some of the concerns that this committee and previous committees have had is just the busyness of Yonge Street specifically. And because the street isn't very wide, and maybe Lisa can address this, whether there is the opportunity to kind of create a little bit more space. From my understanding, there isn't. Even just driving downtown, I don't think there's a lot of exterior path to kind of build into. But if we're looking at on-street parking, there isn't a lot of space to play with specifically on Yonge to allow for passengers to be able to safely kind of get in, out of the car, out of their car, just because you'd be basically almost opening your door directly into the oncoming traffic. So I just wanted to put that on the table just prior to the discussion, just for a little bit of background. And then this is the one spot that we currently have on Mosley Street. So I'll start off. Lisa, is there an opportunity, like, are we looking at the full shabam here? Like, we're doing like curb depressions, like we can take a look at the curbs, or are we just doing markings right now for the streets?
Right now, it's strictly just the markings. And when we come forward, I intend to bring forward an updated streetscape plan to council later this fall. So that would definitely include then the depressed areas, and is there drop-off area? There's a lot of opportunity here. So I'll leave it at that, but yes, there will be opportunity later for those kind of pieces.
Okay. And then any of the spots that we identify in the discussion today, so if we do identify that there's a need for some further on-street barrier-free parking, the curb depressions would come at a later time, but they could be addressed, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. And so one thing I would say for sure, Lisa, as a note, like if we're going to be going through this project, I think the one spot that we do have would have to be updated. As you can see over here, like we don't have curb depressions or anything. It's definitely one of the oldest on-street. I think it's one of the few on-street parkings that we currently have at the town of Aurora. So I would say this one for sure has to be revitalized. The spacing is good. I've been there myself. It's a very large spot. But it does require the curb depression. It's nice that we have the barrier-free parking, but it's not barrier-free. People have to actually drive either up the hill to get onto the exterior path of travel, or go down towards Yonge Street to even get to a curb depression. So I'll leave the comments first to the AAC, let them comment in, and then I'll add in my two pieces at the end. So committee, go ahead.
I kind of wonder if we could have some kind of like more accessible parking on the west side of Yonge Street. Like, I know there's a lot of businesses, especially like the hairdresser in that area, that rely heavily on the older population coming to their establishment. So
it's John. Can I touch base on that?
Sure.
At the corner of Tyler and Yonge Street, there was an apartment building that was built maybe 10 years ago or so. And the committee at that time had requested that it be a similar spot like Mosley Street built on Tyler. And that never did happen. That's something that can be considered on that side of the street, because you don't want people to be going across Yonge Street if at all possible.
Yeah, Lisa, that's a great point that John brought up there. Is there an opportunity for us to even like address a small portion of Tyler and Yonge to be able to kind of nook something in for the west side of Yonge Street, or is that off the table at the time?
So help me where Tyler is on the map. Again, I've been with Aurora January. I know Mosley and the side ones. So is it across from Mosley? Is that the jog street?
I'm pretty sure, John, you know Aurora, you live in that area. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, that's
it's right over here where my mouse is, right?
Okay.
That's where you jog, yeah.
Okay, so the benefit is this map was done internally, so I've rounded the horses internally. So if we need to add a couple spots onto Tyler, I'll put that as a requirement on the map. So would it be on the, I guess, on the north side of Tyler or the south side of Tyler?
It was on the south side that we
South
looked at.
side?
Yeah, there used to be a church in that vacant field, but it kind of burned down a few years ago.
Okay. Is there construction in that area right now?
Small amount.
Okay, we'll take a look. If it's construction, I may not do it right away, only because I don't want to have, that's why we didn't do Church Street or anything right now as far as parking markings, but I'll definitely note it and see what we can put on that street.
And that would be a permanent spot rather than a temporary one, right?
It would be a permanent spot. The markings and like Matt mentioned, when we come back through streetscaping, if that area is torn up, it could be redone, but the space would be there for sure.
On the west side of Yonge Street, they've also got parking in behind. I'm wondering how many of the spots that are behind the stores are actually for accessibility issue people that are needed, and are there many down there?
There's only one that I've seen back there, Joanne. And the problem with that one is you have to walk over to Wellington and up Wellington onto Yonge Street. And the staircase there's a lot of potholes between the parking lot and the staircase.
Oh yeah, okay.
So, and I always,
But that's a private, right?
pardon me?
That is private property, I believe.
No, I thought that's publicly owned, jointly owned with the town and the local businesses. Because according to Google Maps, it says public parking, Old Town of Aurora.
So that might be a good question for Lisa. I'm not sure either. I'm sure Lisa's just started with the municipality, so I'm not going to assume that you know that piece either. But that is a good question. I made the assumption that that is private property, but if you're right, Matthew, that might be an opportunity if it is publicly shared with the municipality. That would be an option for us to add. But I agree with the distance needed to travel to go up to like the north side onto Wellington and then up the hill Wellington, then back south to get to the businesses is not ideal. But it doesn't hurt to have that additional piece if that's an opportunity for us to address. So maybe that's a little an additional piece of homework for Lisa to kind of give back to us there.
Part of that property is owned by the town.
Yeah.
I've seen some of the ownership lines behind the buildings. Yeah, they're little mix.
And then Matthew, to your, like in that property, I know like there's a couple of businesses that do have entries in from the backside as well, right? So there would be there is benefit to us adding in barrier-free parking for that area, correct?
Yeah. And
okay.
that parking lot, if you look at it from an aerial view and from a ground view, it's quite a big piece of land and a big piece of space. And it probably, if it was feasible, they could reconfigure it better to utilize it better and have more parking. Because the way it's designed is very blockish, which is not effective for what you have a lot of wasted space.
So just to round up before we go into the signage piece as well, does anyone have any further comments? So right now we're going to address Mosley Street has the current one barrier-free parking spot that will have to be revamped with appropriate curb depressions. We're making a request for Tyler and Yonge Street on the south side to have a on-street barrier-free parking spot. And then just keep in mind that we do have a number of barrier-free parking spots for Church Street and Victoria Street on street there as well. Are we in consensus that we're not interested in using Yonge Street due to its limited space and how busy it is? Or does anyone feel like there might be an opportunity for us to take a look at that?
We can look at it, but most of the shops are inaccessible anyways.
Correct.
If we want to look at it, there's a couple spots you can look at. Probably the second last spot on the east side of Yonge Street as you approach Wellington always the last spot somebody tries to cut in. So you put people at risk. That's what we're worried about. And maybe the last spot that's indicated on the map there, where Caruso's was, I guess that would be a good spot for a handicap spot. You can access most of the stores. My opinion.
Thank you, John.
Is the width of the barrier-free parking spots wider than a normal parking spot? And if so, would they fit on Yonge Street?
So no, like the width is the same. So, well, there's two types of barrier-free parking spots, and that's why the legislation is kind of open with on-street parking. So if you take a look at the legislation for on-street parking within the AODA, it doesn't give us technical requirements or expectations for what that looks like. It's what we're doing right here is just kind of discussing what we think is safe, what we can make work. But in off-street parking lots, correct, like a type B, which is the smaller barrier-free parking spot, is the exact same as a normal parking spot that we would have. If we're taking a look at the larger type A zone spots, those are a little bit wider. Those ones you would see not working with the dimensions that we see on road. So there isn't any technical requirements for us to follow here. And actually, that's a good question, Lisa. So when we do take a look at our on-street parking right now for Yonge Street, what are we using for dimensions, and what is it based on?
It is based on the current standard for parking through engineering. So
we're using our zoning bylaw?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. So Councillor Gallo would be the same as our type B spots, essentially, which are the regular size parking spots.
And are there any concerns with that and not having the curb depressions? I mean, are we creating any additional problems where adding something onto maybe 2 on Mosley or something like that would be more beneficial?
Correct. And that's what I was mentioning right off the bat with the current spot that we have there. When the town of Aurora has the opportunity, I agree, curb depressions are the must for anything that we're going to consider to be safe for on-street parking. And that's why I was also asking Lisa, maybe if we can get dimensions for how much room we have on the exterior path of travel into Yonge Street, because if we're going to be adding in curb depressions, there's going to have to be a slope calculation that's in there as well to see whether or not we're impeding into the minimum standard of 1.5 meters that the businesses require, just because it's a smaller space over there. So I'm curious whether or not Yonge Street would allow for us. I know with Mosley, because we have a little bit more space, we can definitely make that work. But I'm curious whether Yonge Street would give us that opportunity to have the barrier-free spot, the curb depression, and the amount of allocated space that we need for an exterior path of travel.
On Mosley Street, the south side, closest to Yonge, is there any reason why we wouldn't be able to put in 2 handicap parking spots there, because it's more level? It's closer to Yonge Street where people can go to get to their stores. And then there's still lots of parking to the rest of that block.
Can anyone on the committee confirm if we have a path of travel on the south side of Mosley? I don't remember off the top of my head. I don't know if anyone has Google Maps open or not.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I agree with Joanne that might be an opportunity for us to have on the north and the south side over there.
It seems kind of a place like that is a little bit easier on everybody, whether it's the people using the accessibility spots or other people getting to shopping. They can still get there, that's what I was thinking of. So
more comment I have about more is in the way and the words they always plow the sidewalk and not the bike lane. So you sidewalk a bake of snow and then road.
So just to paraphrase Max, he was mentioning for Mosley Street specifically because of the bike lanes that they have next to the exterior path of travel. During the winter season, there's going to be snowbank accumulation just because the plows go through just the sidewalk specifically. I think that would be addressed, Max, if we have in a curb depression officially over there. Our guys would be going in and ensuring that the curb depressions are open for any of the barrier-free parking, regardless of the bike lanes over there. But I know what you're speaking to, and it's a good point. Any additional comments on just the parking? We will take a look at the signage once we're through that.
So just so I have my notes right, so we're going to try to add at least 3. We'll remark the existing Mosley so that it's painted and refreshed, and then 2 across the street.
So we're looking, yeah. So Mosley, we have the current spot there. We're mentioning 1 on the south side of Mosley. And then on Yonge and Tyler, there would be the additional 1 for the south side. And then I think John was mentioning potentially if we can take a look at Yonge Street for a spot to be put on there. John, can you mention which spot it was again that you were talking about there?
I guess the last spot on the west side, that'd be probably around Crusoe's, where Crusoe's was. And then on the east side, like the second last spot or so.
East side.
Towards Wellington.
Up by Wellington? Like,
Yeah.
Okay, so that's in front of Replenish? Is that up in that corner?
Yeah. The last spot you should probably keep as a cab spot. Cabs only standing?
Is that what it is right now?
Nope. That's my thought.
Okay.
The late night people from the bars and restaurants, they can take advantage of that.
Yep, for sure.
Eventually, I'd like to see a few spots along that way. I know some cities are putting in their Uber spots and some things in high traffic areas. So eventually we'll hopefully see some of that.
Yeah, let's promote that.
Great feedback, everybody. I'm just going to go on to the second section here. And if anyone thinks of anything later on as we're kind of discussing, by all means, you can jump back in. So the next piece, Lisa, maybe if you can speak to the signage. So is this, the design, is this our internal design? Does this come from the Business Improvement Association? How did we go about these 2 options that we have available?
So they come from the BIA. So their logo is what you see now on the top. When they apply it to a green background, we lose what that word is, and I had to ask them to go back and confirm what their logo looks like. They may need some help on their logo because it's, with the cutoff, it doesn't read well, and that's just not correct. So that's the feedback for them. As far as the sign itself, we want to encourage that it's free parking and that the rush hour limitations are not identified on the signage. So this part will be a sticker that will go over the existing signs. And then those will be funded by the BIA. Perfect. So if there's a particular color that was better or a layout that was better, I will address their logo issue.
So I have a couple of points on this, but I'll let the committee go first, and then I can tackle in afterwards. So if anyone has any opinions, I can flip back and forth. I'll kind of go back and forth between the 2 of them. So this is the first option that Lisa's provided over here to the committee. And then this is the option number 2 that they've shown in here. The BIA, I noticed right away, Lisa, when I looked at it, I'm like, that kind of looks, that looks very off.
Even with a white background, it looks odd.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Any comments from the committee on the signage?
Is it only different?
Sorry, John, you cut off there. Can you repeat that?
Is it only the wording that's different? 2 hours limited versus 2-hour limit?
Probably. They just sent it to me as a quick draft. So it was the sign company that they used. They did the mock-up on the other ones. Yeah. So it's a 2-hour limit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks pretty much the same, John, just flipping between the 2 of them.
Yeah, other than that.
Yeah.
And they had requested the 2-hour limit. Apparently, I believe it's a 1 hour on Yonge Street right now. They extended it to 2. Originally, we weren't going to have any, but they just didn't feel it was appropriate in case employees were to park out there all day and take the parking away from visitors. So we left the 2-hour limit. It won't be enforced. We've asked bylaw not to go down there and ticket and tow people. That kind of defeats what we're trying to do, is encourage people to come down. But if we see it's being abused, then we'll say something.
Okay, so I'm hearing some crickets, so I'll go ahead and go first and kind of get this one rolling on this piece. So Lisa, I know we've had the opportunity to sit down and take a look at the FADS document. There's a couple of pieces in there that you and I can speak to offline in terms of like the height of the signage, the contrast, those kind of pieces that we can address. Do we know what kind of font they're using for the specific signage that came in from the BIA?
No, I can find out. This again was a mock-up by their printer.
Yeah. So if it's possible, like I think it would be great if we stuck to the Roboto font that we're currently using as our branding style guideline. If not, that's fine. But as long as they're using some kind of sans serif font in terms of accessibility, that shouldn't be an issue. But if they want to kind of go along with the trend that we're using right now, they can join us for sure. And I actually always ask this for signage because I'm curious why we always use uppercase lettering for signage in general. Is it possible to give them the feedback to show us an option with lowercase lettering? Just because in terms of legibility and contrast, it's a lot easier for individuals with visual impairments to actually be able to read the writing. Yep. I prefer lowercase mixed writing than actually just fully uppercase. So that might just be something I nitpick on, but I'm curious to see what they'd have to say.
Yep.
And then in terms of finishing for the signage itself, do we know what kind of finish they're going to be using? Is it going to be matte, eggshell? Like, have they specified if it's going to be a glare-free material that they're going to be using?
They haven't. If there's a preference or a requirement, that's the standard I'll tell them.
So those would be the 3 I would say. So they can pick between them, either matte, eggshell, or something that's glare-free would be the big ones for anything that we have in terms of signage that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
And then that was it in terms of the sign itself. We already addressed the logo. Maybe the placement is what throws me off more than anything too, how they have compliments of downtown Aurora kind of just mixed in to the logo there. Might be just a little bit too much kind of going on all in the same space. But maybe that gets addressed by having the logo stand out a little bit better on a different background. That might kind of improve that piece, but it just kind of looks jumbled and difficult to read in my opinion. And then, like I said, you and I can sit down tomorrow. If you take a look at my calendar, we can go through the FADS document in terms of like height requirements and stuff, but that wouldn't affect directly what they're doing on the signage. So we can discuss that offline.
Okay, perfect.
Why is the downtown have a lowercase starting when everything else starts with an uppercase or is fully uppercase? Like, that's the first thing I saw. I didn't see the free parking or anything. I just saw the one word that was all lowercase.
I don't know the history of their logo. I wish I was there in the beginning when they made it, but yeah. So we'll address some of their issues. They're new enough, and we want to start promoting them heavily. That because their logo is it doesn't follow standards, that we need to change it anyway. So yeah, we'll be addressing quite a few of those elements in it.
Any other comments from the committee? That's it for me on my end. So I'm just curious whether or not anyone else has something to add in there.
I just had one final thing one thing to add actually about the odd logo is that in a way, to me, when I look at it, it actually looks like numbers. Like I see 3, 1 and almost like a backwards 4 or something. And I didn't even it didn't compute with me that it actually says Business Improvement Association, that was a B, an I, and an A. So I fully, agree that I think it should be sort of separate, because to me, I was thinking, is that some kind of like, what is the significance of the numbers there? And then when you said, oh, that's their BIA logo, I only then realized what I was looking at. So just to add to what's sort of already being said.
Yeah.
Rochelle, I didn't even see that before. Now I'm just going to be thinking of that every time I see it.
Yeah.
That's what I saw, and I'm like, is that your logo? I need to see your logo that's not on the green sign. And then when they sent it to me, I'm like, that is, yeah.
Now I'm going to be seeing 31A.
31A. That's it. It's the new name of the downtown VI. All right.
Do we have a specific color palette, or is that green linked to anything?
That's not the town's green logo or green backing either. So.
It stands out to me as something unique, but I could be wrong. And it just, to me, it doesn't go very well with the blue in the Aurora logo. But
yeah, we might have to have a longer discussion with it. My feedback to them will be, because of the timing, and this is temporary for the summer, especially with the rush hour piece and the parking signs. We'll skip the BIA logo because that's going to be a whole separate conversation on how we redo that and have to go to their board. We'll leave the town's logo and free parking and welcome to downtown, something along those lines for now, and I'll work with them on their logo.
Why don't we have two signs? One above saying the BIA welcomes you with free parking, then have the sign below regarding the parking. Something along that line, so that people realize that it's being given to them.
That's a good, Joanne, I know you're on the phone, so you don't see Lisa nodding her head, but she is nodding her head to she's acknowledging your point there.
I just figure that's a better way to state it, and it would stand out better and everything, and they'd get their special advertisement to that. And they can take them down and save them for another time when they put them up or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then Lisa, I agree with Councillor Gallo's point on the Pantone colors that we would be using on the signage to kind of have something match a little bit closer with the Pantone colors that are used by the municipality.
Yep.
I agree that the greens, the difference is just a little bit too much from one another. They don't quite go together. So if they're willing to match something with what the municipality uses in our color board, that would be, I think it would look a lot cleaner.
I would also say, if you're doing especially two separate signs, thinking about this smaller 2 hour, like if you want to have that there, it's quite small and quite close to the arrow, making it, for someone who might have some visual impairments, harder to see. At first I didn't even notice it until I really started to kind of scan the sign.
Good deal. Do you feel it's necessary to have the arrow?
No.
Good. Yeah, because they're spaced enough next to each other that I don't know if the arrow is necessary, but I don't think it was on the other one prior either, though.
Perfect. Any other comments from committee members? Okay, I think you might be free to go here, Lisa.
All right.
So Rochelle, Madam Chair, I'll pass it back over to you.
Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So if there are no further comments or questions, I'll call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Okay, that carries. All right. So that moves us back to 6.2. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is regarding Accessibility Advisory Committee input and comments for site plan application SP-2020-11, submission number 2, and this is for 130 Addison Hall Circle. May I have a mover and a seconder to put the item on the floor for discussion?
Matthew.
Thanks, Matthew. A second?
Joanne.
Thanks, Joanne. Okay, Matt.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just want to confirm I had to just jump off to quickly scroll through the agenda. Can everyone see the memorandum in front of them?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Yep.
Okay, so like Rochelle was mentioning, we are taking a look at SP 2020-11. So this is the second submission that we're taking a look at here for 130 Addison Hall Circle. And just to kind of give you a very brief background on this, this is a warehouse development. And from my memory, if it serves me correct, we have 3 tenants that would be in this specific warehouse development. And so just jumping in, this page, all of you guys would have in your packages, just gives you kind of the description of all the numberings and the features that they've added in there. In terms of the site plan, so I didn't actually have any further comments specifically for the second submission. We did have a good number of comments in the first submission that we provided. So I just wanted to go through them with the committee just so you can see how they've addressed them. So originally, we didn't have the appropriate amount of barrier-free parking specifically for this site. And so you can see right now they have the 3 spots. And so on the left side of this specific building, you have your first tenant. So they have a larger warehouse. And then on the second half, you have tenant number 2, and then tenant number 3 where my mouse is currently hovering. So we have 2 barrier-free spots associated with the main entry building code. We indicated that we would like to see proper tactile indicators at all. And then we were mentioning consideration for rest areas along the exterior path of travel over here, as long as it doesn't impede with the 1.5 meter exterior path of travel minimum. And so they addressed all of the comments that we made in here. So it was great to see that from the developer. They had no issues with any of the comments, the committee previous comments. And then I'm curious to see what you guys think about the addition of 1 barrier-free parking spots, 1 spot for tenant 2 and tenant number 3.
Matt, would that put them above their
Correct.
okay requirement?
Yep.
And this is employee parking as well, I guess.
Correct. That's why I wanted to bring it in here to see if it's a push. It's not like they have a ton of parking specifically in here. I believe they have 62 spots, so it's not a large parking lot specifically. And so, like I said, with the legislative requirements, I think off the top of my head, it was like 2. And so rounding that number brings us up obviously to 3 barrier-free spots, and then the 4th would be exceeding it. Okay, while you guys are thinking, I'll go ahead and just jump through the other slides so you can see the different drawings. These are just interior drawings and elevations. So again, these are warehouse buildings, so nothing special or fancy going into them. And then I think I have elevation drawings here for you as well, so you can kind of just see the facings of these specific buildings. So the drawings over here on the bottom is what the public would see entering in, or the employees would see entering into these specific buildings. And then this would be the trucking loading area that you see over here on the backside. And so I'll just jump right back into the one drawing that you probably care most about over here. Hence, like I said, is the committee want to push in for that remaining barrier-free parking spot, or are we okay with them meeting the minimum requirements in this case?
I think it doesn't hurt to ask for it, especially if it's 2 other tenants.
Okay,
I agree.
I'll put that in, and then in submission 3, we'll see what they come back with, and we can kind of go from there. Is that fair with everyone?
Sounds good.
Matt, just a quick question. Is it just entirely warehouse space, or is the intent, is this just a raw concrete structure and who's ever going to go in there is going to be building in whatever they need to build?
It looks so from the memorandum that I received over here, it's saying that it facilitates a proposed warehouse development. So there isn't much more information on my end in terms of what they're developing over here. But it's a good question, and I can go back to the developer through planning and ask that question.
Just seems odd. No office space whatsoever.
Yeah, nothing was indicated in the drawings there.
So at this time, we don't really worry about the public access to it. More or less, this would be employee spots, right?
That's what it's looking like, John, but we can confirm. Okay, so I'm hearing crickets right now. So Rochelle, I'll pass it back over to you, and then I'll put those comments in over here. And then on the next submission, we can have both those questions answered for the committee.
Okay. All right, so no further comments or questions then. So I'll go ahead and call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that carries. So that brings us next to item 6.3, and that is regarding Accessibility Advisory Committee input and comments for site plan application at SP-2021-01, submission number 1, and this is for 45 Eric T. Smith Way. May I have a mover and a seconder to put the item on the floor for discussion?
Matthew.
Thanks, Matthew. And a second?
John.
Thank you, John. All right, so Matt, do you want to lead us here?
Sure can. Thank you, Madam Chair. So like Rochelle was mentioning, this is SP 2021-01, 45 Eric T. Way. And so this is going to be a 2-story industrial building. And so we can go ahead and take a look at these drawings. So here's just before we jump into the actual specific site plan application, this is just the front page of the application. So you can kind of take a look at what the industrial building looks like from the exterior perspective. Okay. So this is an interesting site plan application, and I do have a couple of questions for the committee specifically for this one. So we'll go through kind of just a walkthrough of how the traffic looks like it's supposed to flow through this specific site plan. So over here on the left side where you see my mouse hovering is Eric T. Smith Way. So this is where you're going to have the majority, obviously, of your traffic coming in. It looks like it's meant to come in through the first entrance over here. And then anyone that's coming in for parking has one of 2 options. So you could either continue along the building where you have all of your barrier-free parking. And so you can see right at the beginning over here, we have 3 barrier-free parking spots. And then towards the middle of the building, we have an additional 2 barrier-free parking. I'll address the parking itself, but continuing on that, so trucks can continue along the front of the building, reach back around over to the loading dock. Now, in terms of any patrons coming in, they have the front parking over here. And then from units 1 to 7, we have additional parking that's not actually perpendicular to the building itself. So you can see that the parking over here looks to be angled on a 45-degree angle. Now, there is no barrier-free parking addressed over here. And so this is where I wanted to speak to the committee about whether or not we are interested in having an additional piece. I was talking to the planning team about maybe having one more barrier-free parking spot added in over here for unit 7. But I'm curious from your perspective, apparently parking like this is supposed to be easier for backing in, backing out. From your experiences, has anyone found this to be more accessible for your vehicles if any of you have used this kind of styled parking, or do you prefer the regular perpendicular parking to buildings is my question out to you guys. Unless no one's done it before, then that's a viable option too.
I think normal parking's fine. I think this perpendicular parking is kind of weird, and a lot of people will just get frustrated and they'll end up parking all along the side of the building. So
yeah, so this parking, I was reading a little bit about it. Apparently it does facilitate traffic flow. So when they're coming in through Eric T. Smith Way over here, if they come in, they park here. It's basically like you drive into the spot, and then when you reverse out, it facilitates people driving towards the bottom half where everyone's supposed to be exiting out of this. And so from my reading, that's the reasoning for this style of parking. It's not very common, obviously, in terms of having the most parking space. Regular parking spots obviously provides a little bit more for you. Now, the barrier-free parking standards, they're short on barrier-free parking in the site plan application. So you can see that they have this 3 spots over here and they have 2 towards the center of the building. They do require 1 additional barrier-free parking, and that's where I wanted to have that conversation with the Accessibility Advisory Committee. It looks like units 1 all the way to 21 over here are fairly well covered, right? Like we have 3 spots over here where it's not too much of a travel even along the side over here all the way to unit 7. but we have parking here that covers all of the units across the board from 1 to 21. So would we like to see the barrier-free parking remain on this side, and we can add one more over here between like unit 14 and unit 15? Or do we go with what I was speaking to with planning and still add one in over here with this diagonal 45-degree parking close to unit 7? What would be the preference or the opinion of the committee?
Can I just ask a question, Matt? So the existing, is it five spaces currently, you said,
You
right?
got it, yep.
Okay, so the existing 5 spaces there along that side, is there, so the path of travel, can you sort of, like once you've gotten out of your vehicle, can you sort of round the corner on to access units 1 through 7 without actually having to go on the road or anything like that?
Yep, so you can see over here, right along units 1 to 7, where the 3 barrier-free parking spots are. They both have their access aisles that lead onto an exterior path of travel, which then turns over here and leads down to units 1 to 7. So there is an accessible path of travel to all of the units. The reason we were talking about the potential of the additional spot added in over here to unit 7 is it's a little bit more of a trek, right? Rather than just people coming in from over here, we could add one in to kind of satisfy that whole units 1 to 7 area. So that's why we were having a discussion to have one more spot added in over here versus along units 8 to 21.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I mean, it's always good to have one on the side that doesn't have a parking spot already. So, I mean, I would think it would be good to have it along that side. However, I'm just trying to, the problem for me is I'm trying to think the logistics of an accessible parking space on an angle like that. And for the life of me, I'm trying to, I can't remember ever having parked in one on an angle like that. So I'm trying to think, you know, what are the, is there an advantage, disadvantage? And I just can't think of one.
So I had to read about it. Like I haven't seen any here in our municipality or any of our neighboring, just from personal experience. I haven't come across one myself quite yet. So I did do a little bit of research about it. Like I was mentioning when I was talking about these spots specifically, apparently they are much easier to park in because they're angled. And then when you're reversing, like you just reverse out and then turn to wherever you're driving out. So it does facilitate the ease of being able to park into a spot and then come out of a spot. In terms of the dimensions, when I was looking online, they looked funny, but they still meet the standards, right? So the entire length of the barrier-free parking spot, including the access aisle, all the dimensions would remain exactly the same. So you wouldn't be losing anything in terms of being barrier-free by adding in a spot over there. It would just look different than I think what most of us are used to seeing in a parking lot.
Okay. Yeah, then I would say, I mean, why not have one along the side for units 1 to 7? I mean, it makes it a little bit easier to access those entry points.
John,
I would agree. I mean, if for one short, I think the front should have it. Just visually, I can't see how an additional width on some of those would work, but if it's feasible, it's feasible. It looks to me that the reason why they're on a 45 because they cannot fit them
I think
end
so
to
too.
end
Yeah.
because of the site and the space and the amount of units that they want to get in there. I don't think it's just they're being nice and a unique design.
Yeah.
Regular parking spots there.
I
would double check the sizing. It looks just visually would be tough to get in a wider parking spot in that configuration, but if it exists, it exists.
Yeah, what they might have to do if they are able to accommodate this, we would probably have to use, to Councillor Gallo's point, a type B spot on this side of the building just because of the configuration that they have. And then the additional type A that they currently need to add in would have to remain up on the units 8 to 21 area. But we'll see what they come back to us with. Maybe it is possible to add in that type A. So I'll make that request, is that we have that spot added in over there. And then we'll see what their feedback comes back to us in terms of spacing and whether or not that is a possibility.
yeah, it's John again. We've used these in the States. We've seen it quite often in the States. So not really tricky at all in terms of getting in and out. The only thing that bothers me in these multiple unit type of complexes is the sidewalks going from one end to the other end. A lot of times they put a sandwich board out in front saying specials today or whatever. Welcome so-and-so. Those sandwich boards can be intrusive for anybody in a chair or with a walker.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, and Councillor Gallo, maybe you can jump in on this as well, as I'm pretty sure that sits within our zoning bylaws and within our bylaw team is to not allow for signage specifically on exterior paths of travel, depending on how much space is in there. But maybe the councillor can chime in on that piece. I'm pretty certain on that though.
I would agree, and there are multiple buildings like this in town, and there's actually one that I know quite well, and yeah, it's not allowed on the sidewalks. And in fact, you need a permit to have it even on the street.
Yeah. I saw a lot of that happening when we had our last election, so that's where that kind of popped into my head. Okay, so I've written down that piece. So we will request, like I was mentioning, I was speaking to planning already about like that unit, and it's unit 7 area. So we can go ahead and proceed with that comment in there, and we'll see in terms of spacing whether or not that works for us. Other comments for the site plan. Overall, it looks very well built, and so we'll kind of continue along with the conversation. As you can see from the public area over here, they do have a crosswalk with their appropriate curb depressions allocated over here. So people coming in from the sidewalk along Eric T. Smith have a crosswalk in order to get over to the main entrance between unit 1 to 7 and then 8 to 21. So that's nice to see that they added that in. Usually that's a request that we have to make in. So they have that allocated over here. There was no issues with any of the elevations or grades specifically for the site plan application. The exterior path of travel leading around the building meets code, so there's no issues in terms of spacing for any of the corners or in front of the units, other than what John is mentioning. If any of them are putting out any kind of signage, obviously that would impede it, but they would have to have permits to do anything along those lines. So the remaining comments that I added in for this specific site plan are just regulars. So for any of the doorways that we have in here is obviously ensuring that we have automatic door operators available with proper time delays. These units do have staircases, as you can see, between units 1 and 2, 3, 4, and so on, to ensure that they have their proper tactile indicators associated with any of the staircases that they're providing in here. And then I never forget this one anymore, Max's favorite. We requested for the emergency evacuation chairs to be considered for any of the units that do have a staircase within their units. So those were the comments that I added in for that. Like I said, overall, the site plan it's a very simple site plan application, so nothing too complicated over here, but I'll open it up over to the committee to see if there's any other comments or feedback they'd like to add in.
What? Committee suggest a code depression new unit 21.
Yep. So just to paraphrase what Max was mentioning, he was asking whether or not that we can ask for a curb depression to be added in over here near unit 20 to 21. Obviously, just in case anyone is parking. I think the issue with that, and I can clarify with our zoning bylaw team, is if we have curb depressions associated over here where we don't have a clear path of travel indicated for pedestrians coming in, you're almost inciting that people should be having the right of way coming out from the exterior path of travel. But that's something I'd have to confirm, Max, but it's a good point. Got it. Okay, thank you. Any other comments from committee members? No? Okay. Rochelle, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. So if there's no further comments, I'll go ahead and call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that carries. All right, so we're on to 6.4 now. This is regarding Accessibility Advisory Committee input and comments for site plan application SP 2021-03, submission number 1 for 1623 Wellington Street East. May I have a mover and a seconder to put the item on the floor for discussion?
Matthew.
Thanks, Matthew. And a second?
Joanne.
Thanks, Joanne. Okay, Matt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So like Rochelle was mentioning, we're taking a look at SP 2021-03. This is the first submission that we're taking a look at specifically for this unit. It's going to be located at 1623 Wellington Street East. The specific site plan application that we're going to be taking a look at here is actually a vehicle dealership. And so this dealership is built and constructed to have 2 stories. So it's going to be one of the larger ones. Before we get into it, I'll say that overall, the building is very well built from an accessibility perspective. Any of the comments that I've really indicated in here are like nice to haves, and we're encouraging them to consider these features when we're going through the site plan application process. But we can go ahead and go through it. So based on the spots that have been provided over here, it does appear, and I say it appears that they're short. And can everyone confirm, are your faces, can you see your own faces as I share my screen? Like, is it in the way of the site plan application, or is it good for you guys on your end? Everyone's good? Okay, nodding heads. I see your faces on my end, so I just want to make sure that's not impeding the site plan for you guys. Okay, in terms of the site plan application over here, they have provided a couple of barrier-free parking spots over here, right leading into the entry of the specific BMW dealership. In the grand scheme of things, it's technically speaking short in terms of barrier-free parking. And so one of the comments that I made over to the planning division is for them to indicate how much of this parking is actually allocated towards pedestrian use. Obviously, we all know whenever you go into a dealership, the majority of the parking spots are used for cars that they're selling. So I asked for that clarification. So we'll get that back in the future submission. But for the time being, based on the numbers that they've provided over here, I did ask them to meet the minimum requirements of 7 barrier-free parking spots for the lot. But I imagine that they're going to come back and adjust, letting us know what's actually designated for the public coming in versus what's actually being used for their cars in the specific lot. So I just wanted to point that piece out. So that won't be a big topic for us as we're going through the specific site plan application. Overall, you can see, so this is the front entry into the building where the sales department is, and we can take a look at the actual floor plans momentarily. Leading around the building, you can see that they have a large exterior path of travel. It gets a little bit narrow. One of the comments I made over here, you can see, and I'll zoom in for you guys so you can see a little bit more clearly. They have a bike rack located pretty much right at the end of the exterior path of travel. So one of the comments I made over here, just because it gets tight, obviously, if you have your bike rack here, plus the bike sticking out, it blocks off that path of travel from the front to the back of the building. Especially currently with COVID situation, which we don't know how long that's going to last. Most buildings ask for a one-way entry, and if they have the opportunity for an exit point leading out the other side of the building, they would ask people to follow that path, meaning that they would enter out the right side of the building over here and would have to travel back through this bike rack area. So if we have bikes in that area, it would impede the path of travel. So that's why I made that comment specifically for that piece. On the other side of the building, and you'll see this a little bit more clearly, we have the service unit and the ramp for the cars to be able to get onto the second floor of this building. So we have our service entrance over here. They have a garage. They obviously service the vehicles. This over here towards the bottom of the diagram is the ramp that leads up to the second floor of the building. And then on the back end over here, which you'll see in the next couple of diagrams, you'll actually see the actual car wash they have available as well. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit here and I'll show you the interior drawings and we can kind of continue on with our comments. Actually, before I do, was there anything anyone wanted to mention, or am I okay to proceed over there? Okay, sounds like everyone's okay with that. So this is taking a look at the main entrance of the building. So over here, we have our 2 main doors. So one of the things I mentioned, normally we just ask for door operators. For a building like this, they have the space and the capability, and you can see that they have already a vestibule available. And so the request was put in to have sliding doors access for this building to see if they have enough space to add those pieces in. And so once you're into the building, there's a couple of amenities available on the main floor. So over here in this general area, we have their offices. They have indicated a universal washroom on the main floor. So you can see that that's located right over here where my mouse is hovering towards the center of the application. And then right next to that, we have both a designated washroom for males and then a designated washroom for females. And so the universal washroom is the closest to the exterior path of travel. So that's as barrier-free as you're kind of gonna get it based on the location that they've provided. They do have staircases leading up to the main floors. So obviously our normal comments for tactile indicators are included in that piece. They do have an elevator for this building, which is fantastic. So regardless of the staircases, anyone that requires barrier-free entry to get onto the second floor does have the opportunity to do that through the elevator provided over here. Now moving towards the other side of the building where we have service, you'll notice along the drawing that they basically just have like a parts section, service counters, that kind of thing. And within the comments that I've provided over here, one of the things that I mentioned is for any of the customer service desks that they provide, so whether that's in the actual area where they're doing service for your vehicle or in the main sales office of the building, that they consider having induction loops placed in for the building. So that way anyone coming in with hearing impairments is able to take advantage of that tool if available. Plexiglass is obviously becoming very common amongst industries right now as a protection means for COVID. And so I imagine that's going to stay pretty regular. And for those of you that have tried speaking to an individual through plexiglass and then through a mask on top of that, not having that opportunity to see someone use their mouth in order to kind of gauge what they're saying is quite a bit more difficult. So I think that induction loop comment is quite important moving forward for any of the applications that we're taking a look at. Looking at the second floor, and I'm just going to zoom in here because I'm working on a little screen, so bear with me here. So we have the elevator that I was mentioning, plus obviously the two staircases that lead up to the second floor. What you'll see up here, we have obviously sales offices available for any of the workers that are up here. They do have a cafe bar located here as well and a lunchroom. And so one of the comments we indicated over here is just to ensure that they have accessible tables provided for the cafe bar and for the lunchroom, just in case any of the individuals coming in to buy or service their vehicle are able to enjoy it, as well as any of the staff members that might be working there for them to be able to access the tables. Now, one of the last comments I made for this specific site plan is for the boardroom, similar to what I was mentioning for the service counters. Whenever they have a boardroom, usually they do presentations. So similar to what we currently have at Town Hall and a couple of the other locations throughout the municipality, I asked for induction loops to be added in for the boardroom. And then finally, we were mentioning that in the main lobby, I didn't catch that when I was speaking and going through that, but if they have a waiting area with fixed seating, to ensure that they also include accessible seating in the waiting area that they provide. So those were the comments that I put in here, and I'll just continue through the drawing just to kind of show you guys everything prior to kind of hearing any of the comments you guys might have. But you can see here's the ramp that I was mentioning leading into the second floor. So that way you can get some vehicles up here as well. And then they also have an open rooftop parking area available on the top as well. I'm just going to zoom back out here.
Matt, it's Joanne.
Yes, go ahead, Joanne.
Trouble with my phone. If I disappear, you'll know why.
Okay, sounds good, Joanne.
Thanks.
No problem. And so this is just a continuation of the drawings. Here's a good view of the elevation, so you can see the construction of how the building is going to take, how it's going to look from the exterior. Very typical of a normal BMW dealership for those of you that have seen it previously. And so, yeah, those were my comments. And so I'll pass it over to the Accessibility Advisory Committee. Like I mentioned, this is overall built very well. Like the spacing between the hallways and everything is very good. They obviously have their elevators and amenities that are barrier free. And so a lot of the comments that we added in there are just for them to exceed the requirements of the AODA. So floor is open to the committee to add in any suggestions that I may have missed.
How about a feedback tree?
You got me the one time I didn't say it, but it is in my comments. So it is in there, Max. So thank you for bringing that up. I skipped over that one bullet point that I have in my notes here, but the evacuation chairs have been noted in the comments that I sent over to the planning division. Thank you.
Technically, there is a ramp, but
Any other comments from anyone else?
Matt, is there a requirement for a barrier-free washroom on the second floor, or does the ground floor suffice?
So the ground floor does suffice. So the way the universal washrooms sit in the Ontario Building Code, it works by stories. And so between a building like of this capacity, the universal washroom on the main floor does pass for the Ontario Building Code. Yeah, and I think most of the servicing that we would have for the public is going to happen on the main floor regardless. And the second floor is probably going to be a little bit more administrative for like staff members and whatnot that would be coming into this building. They did have washrooms, so I can, while if anyone else wants to comment, I can jump in there and we can take a look at that a little bit in more detail. Yeah, so right over here, Councillor Gallo, we do have washrooms available, but these are just regular stalls that they provided over here. So you can see that they have, this one's a little bit larger. So this one could be built into a universal washroom right next over to the cafe, but any of the staff washrooms over here are just individualized stalls. So these are a little bit smaller. But I'm going to make note of it regardless to see if we can get the second universal washroom on the second floor. It does look from washroom number 2 over here that they would have the space to do it. Any other comments from committee members? Okay, Rochelle, I think it's back to you.
All right. Okay, so no further comments then. I will call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that carries. That brings us to 6.5 regarding Accessibility Advisory Committee input and comments for site plan application SP 2021-04. Submission number 1 at 1623 Wellington Street East. Can I get a mover and a seconder to put the item on the floor for discussion?
Matthew.
Thanks, Matthew. And a second?
John.
Thank you, John. Okay. All right. So do you want to take it away, Matt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yep. So we're going to take a look at SP 2021-04. So this is the first submission that we're taking a look at for this piece. And so this is going to be a 4-story commercial self-storage unit. And so I don't know that we've actually, I think we have actually taken a look at one of these previously with this committee. So you guys would be familiar with this. So this is a 4-story building. And so there isn't a lot for us to address. Any of the office spaces or whatever is going to be on the main floor. And then the additional units that you have above are obviously going to be all storage. And so we can go ahead and take a look at the site plan. I'll zoom in so it's a little bit easier for you guys to be able to see everything. Okay, so entering in off of the road, they do meet the barrier-free requirements. They have a type A and type B spot with their associated access aisle right over here, curb depression included. This is one of the things I wanted to speak to you specifically about this one. So the barrier-free parking by the developer has been added in the nicest spot in terms of any anytime that they might have to go into the office spaces, speak to any of the staff members that are going to be working in the specific story building. So the barrier-free parking is right next to any of that space, which is fantastic. Now they have additional entrances over here with elevator space in order to go up to the floors that doesn't have the barrier-free parking. So as you can see, there is limitations in how much parking spaces we have for this specific unit. They don't have a lot of parking at all. They basically just have the space right in front of the entrances. And so 2 is the requirement. And there isn't going to be that much more space for us to add in another barrier-free parking spot. And the reason I say that is if we add an additional one over here, it can work, but we also then need to have one individualized access aisle that goes with it, right? So we're taking up basically 2 additional spots by adding in one barrier-free parking over here. So my question to the committee is, are you guys okay with the current format that has been provided where we have 2 barrier-free parking spots associated with the office space where the staff members are, and they do have a path of travel in order to get over to the entrance where the storage units would be? Or there's going to be 3 options here, right? So we keep it as is. Option 2 is obviously add in a spot, but we're reducing the parking significantly. Or option 3 is we keep one barrier-free parking spot over here with an access aisle, and then we move one of the barrier-free parking spots over to the opposite side, and then it would have its own access aisle. So that way we're saving one regular parking spot for the public that would have to access this commercial unit. So I didn't want to make that decision on my own. I wanted to bring that over to the committee and just kind of maybe bounce that idea off you guys and see what your opinion was on that piece. Guys got to answer this one. I'm not going to move along.
Well, I would say my vote would be to move the second one that is there and put it onto the other side, so there's one on each.
I think that's the most realistic option. I would agree with Rochelle. I think that's probably the best ask that we can have in this case scenario without eliminating too much of the remaining parking over there. Does anyone oppose that train of thought, or does anyone else have a different comment than myself and Rochelle?
So the consequences of that would be losing 2 spots on the other side.
Yeah, if we added in like its own individualized barrier-free parking, we would be taking up one. So with the mouse, you can see we would take up basically this spot for barrier-free. And then the consequence of it would be that we would need an access aisle over here. And so therefore, yes, you'd be losing an additional parking. Now, the developer might be able to build in over here and add in an additional parking spot. But it looks like they've already got, like, I think it's a generator over here that's been established. So I don't know if they're going to be able to find a different spot for that.
But you would gain a spot on the other side.
Sorry. So if we keep, I was mentioning, if we keep these over here.
I see.
Yeah, that's the consequence of just adding another barrier-free parking spot to the opposite side, is we would lose 2 regular parking spots. But correct, if we remove one over here, you would gain 1 spot here, and then you would just have the additional barrier-free parking. So it would basically be the same. We're just redistributing where the barrier-free parking is on this map.
Well, no, unless you can find on the other side the loading area, you would be 1 down if you were to move it to the other side. Is that correct?
It could, yes. Yeah, we'd have to look at overall like how much this would take away, but it could.
That would make the most sense to have 1 on each side.
Yep.
Try our best to maintain the total number of parking spots.
Matt, can I ask a question? Sorry, can I ask a question?
Yep.
On the side that we're suggesting to move one of the parking spots to, there's that sort of, I don't know, bit of concrete that juts out there. Is that like how wide, I don't know, I'm not able to tell how wide that would be. And is that something that, like, if someone were getting out of a wheelchair van, let's say, could they travel along that bit of pathway? Or
I would recommend that we put the barrier free, like, because we're going to be shifting the alignment of these spots regardless. I would ask for the barrier free parking spot to be put directly in front of the entrance over here. So we wouldn't have to worry. Yeah, we wouldn't have to worry about that piece. So we have this spot here with its access aisle towards the middle, because we're trying to create the shortest path of travel for anyone that requires barrier free entry.
Okay, all right, that's good.
Good question though. So on top of that, just so you guys can see the other notes that I just put in for this specific site plan, I mentioned in for the proposed staircases, obviously, like we always talk about, tactile indicators, your evacuation chairs, Max, are included in that piece as well. And then similar to what I was mentioning for the dealership, for their boardrooms or any of the customer service desks, they have indicated over here that they provide the induction loops as well. And so you can see as well that they do have a universal washroom over here right next over to the boardrooms. So that's good to see as well. And then they just have a little water closet right next to that. Let me show you the other drawings, just so you guys get a full picture of everything. Then we can continue from there. And so you can see over here, this is similar to what we were just talking about, where you have your front entrances for the building. And that was pretty much it. So very simple drawings for this site plan application as a first submission. They're not showing us a lot of the interior quite yet. So we don't know what the floors for the actual storage units look like in this application. But overall, on the main floor, it looks very barrier-free based on what they've provided so far. So I will bring that comment back over to the developer to see if we can redistribute the barrier-free parking over there, and then we'll take a look on submission to what they've provided for us. Is there any other comments? Pretty easy site plan over here. Like, there's nothing too complicated for us to take a look at. But anything else that you guys would like to see added in?
I was wondering if they consider putting in accessible storage units, or how that works.
So it's a great question. Does anyone know what that would look like, right? And so that's where I'm curious to see what their drawings show for the interior part of it, like what the units look like, right? Like if they're going to be just raised doors where you could add in like a door operator for some of these units. That's a great question. But has anyone on the committee seen an actual barrier-free storage unit? I'm actually curious whether or not someone has worked with one in the past. I haven't. I don't think I've ever seen one. Usually they're manually pulled up, right? So that's a great question, Max, and I'll ask that, but I'd have to do some research to see what qualifies as a barrier-free storage unit. It's definitely not in the legislation or anything along those lines from my understanding. Good question. So Rochelle, I think it's back over to you.
All right. All right. So no further comments then. I'll go ahead and call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that carries. And that brings us to 6.6, our roundtable discussion for our Town of Aurora Accessibility Plan 2018 to 2024. May I have a mover and a seconder to put the item on the floor for discussion?
Matthew.
Thanks,
Joanne.
Matthew, in a second. And Joanne, thank you. All right, Matt, you can start us off with this.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So it looks like we're going to make it, guys. I was actually worried that we weren't going to finish within the 2 hours today, but we're right on track. So that's awesome to see. Okay, so in terms of accessibility plan, a couple of updates for you guys. So I know we were taking a look at the facility accessibility design standards last week, and I know a couple of members were not able to join us and have that discussion. So I just wanted to put it on the table that if you're interested in providing comments the discussion that we were having last week, we met with Bob Topping, who is the president of Designable, who are we working with, and he gave us an excellent presentation of the breakdown of how this document's going to work and its application purposes for us as a municipality. We're going to be providing a number of drafts. So for those of you that weren't able to attend last week, if you've had the opportunity to take a look through the document, or if you have any questions, more than happy to answer you now. We're going to be providing the second draft over to the committee in the May meeting, and that will include all of the staff comments that we provided as well. So we've already had some input coming in from staff members already, which has been great. They're all on board with this. And so we have the remainder of the comments coming in from staff this Friday, actually, so April 16th. And that's all going to be submitted over. And then the second draft will be provided over to the committee for further discussion. And we can go through exactly what has been changed, what's been updated, what's been added, all of that fun stuff when the second draft comes over to you guys in the May meeting. But I wanted to open the floor very quickly, just for those that weren't able to attend. If there was any questions that wanted to be discussed at the table today, or if we can take that offline, that's okay as well. But prior to going ahead, does anyone have any questions about what we discussed last week? No? Okay. So continuing on with the accessibility plan, one of the items that we were talking about was the Aurora Senior Center and adding in the ramp and door operators coming out of the west side of the building leading into the bocce courts. And so we've met with the operations team. I've had an opportunity to speak to some of our building inspectors to see what the best option is for us, taking a look at that building and developing a ramp. And so a couple of things were brought up, and I'll let you guys know what we think is probably the best solution. So the grading coming out of the building, it's a one-step drop coming out of the west side of the building. And so there is enough space to the bocce courts where the interlocking starts to do an exterior path of travel. And so what that means is it would be less than 5% slope coming straight out of the door leading into the bocce courts. Now, our staff recommendation is to go above that minimum requirement. We actually want to go ahead and provide a ramp platform. And so what that means is when the door opens, we would have an area where we have about 1.6 meter by 1.6 meter platform where people are able to come out of the doorway and have a flat surface. And then we would have a southbound ramp leading down, again, less than 5%. Onto the main floor where people are able to go out onto the bocce court. So we're going above the standards over here, but it's probably the safest route. And especially considering that this is a senior center, a lot of these individuals aren't going to be the strongest. So if we have anyone coming in with mobility devices or using a wheelchair or anything along those lines, we want to have a safe platform for them to be on before entering into that doorway. Now, one of the things to consider with that is we would have to make sure that we properly time the door delays here, right? So where we have the actual wave operator for this building, we would have one probably at the bottom of the ramp, but we'll probably speak to Royal Securities, who we work with for these door operators, to see whether or not there's an opportunity for us to build in a post on the platform itself, if there's enough space. Because what we have to consider is when the door opens, is there still enough space for someone to be in there with a wheelchair, scooter, or any of those mobility devices in order to be able to get in successfully? So we are working on it. We have a couple of ideas kind of coming together, and we'll probably bring some drawings over to the committee in the next month. So that might come into you guys May. June will probably be the latest. And then I'll probably get a quote for you guys as well. We're anticipating for this to be less than $10,000. For the whole project to be able to add in the door operator and the ramp. But we can get you those official numbers when we have the specs and the drawings fully complete. So that's the update on the senior center. Wanted to give you guys a quick update on some of the WCAG work that we're currently doing. And so we are continuing to rebuild all of our documents. One of the pieces that we're sitting down with management right now is to we're aiming to eliminate 100% of the PDFs that are currently used online for our forms. And so that would eliminate about 15 to 20% of the documents that we currently have online that are used in PDF format. And so that would speak to what I was mentioning to in previous conversations, where we're trying to aim towards going to HTML, and we're kind of staying away from that whole PDF side of things. There's always going to be some documents that we have in PDF format, obviously through committees and whatnot, there's going to be some space for PDFs. But we're starting to target that. And if you guys head over to our accessibility page, you guys can see an example of this. One of the forms that I've currently just transferred over is our assisted recycling and garbage application form. This used to be in PDF. And so you can see over there how we've translated that over into using HTML format. And that's what we're going to be transitioning everyone over to at the town of Aurora. That's the hope. Now, this is going to be one of the big projects that we have Max working with us over the next couple of months. And so he's going to be helping staff members over with that transition in order to try to get this done in a timely manner over the next couple of months. One of the other things that we're also addressing for our accessibility page as well is going to be to actually giving a little bit more information over to the public about all the amazing resources that all of these committees have done over the last couple of years. I know I've spoken with a couple of the committee members, and it's outstanding all the work that we do and all the features that we're providing, but we want to make sure that the public is aware of what's available to them. So one of the things that we're adding into our accessibility page is actually a resource category where we have information about what the committee has done over the last many years that they've been doing this, but in my time, the last couple of years that we've been adding in, what's available to them, where it's located, and what it does specifically for them. And I think that will help with comfort level for any of the individuals that are looking to come in and use any of the amenities that we have around the municipality. And so Max is going to be helping along with that as well. Now, one of the things Max and I met earlier this morning, and one of the things that we also want to add in there, and this is going to be a project that he's going to be tackling with each of the committee members, is the addition of a Meet the AAC section. I think it'd be nice for the community to know who is advocating for a barrier-free town of Aurora. And so Max is going to reach out to you guys and try to kind of give a quick description of each of the members, why they joined into the committee, what their position is on the committee, and what they're kind of advocating for with making the town of Aurora barrier free. So you can anticipate Max reaching out to you in probably the next couple of weeks to start building that section over here for our accessibility page for the town of Aurora. And then Joanne, I know you don't have email, so we'll do a phone call interview with you to just kind of go over what you would like to see in your biography for the page over there.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. And then last two, and then you guys can ask away. So we also have coming in through some of the COVID grants that we're receiving, we are doing a full-on door operator project for the municipality. So obviously over the years, the AAC has implemented a ton of door operators throughout a number of the facilities. We have a current mix. So any of the ones that I've been working on have been wave operated, but we have some of the older stuff that until we retro is still a physical push button. All of these are being transferred over to wave operators. So we'll no longer have any of our door operators with a push style. And so you guys would have remembered from the senior center video that we went over previously that we have some of those harder to push buttons. So all of those are going to be transitioned over to using wave operators moving forward. So we're not going to have to deal with that any longer. And that will be a project that's complete in 2021. And then the last piece. And so next month, I will bring over, just because we're running short on time, so I'm not going to pull it up right now. But next week, I can give you guys a full breakdown of our, because we normally look at the operational sheet where like all these funds are kind of going towards. We also have our Browsealoud Renewal coming up. And so that's the tool that you guys will see on the Town of Aurora website. And so this provides an opportunity for individuals that are trying to make sure that our website is as accessible as possible for them. What the tool basically does is it does some speech reading for individuals. It creates simplification of text messages. So if you ever take a look at it, it basically strips away any of the images, formats, and kind of puts it basically in a left aligned format for people to have ease of reading. And it kind of formats the page to make things as easy as possible for any of the patrons taking a look at our information on the website. So that renewal is coming up as well. That normally costs, I think it was off the top of my head, about $4,000 for a 2-year subscription to have that piece on there. And so that will be in the operating budget that I bring over to you guys, just to show all the things that we're working on and how much funds we have available for us remaining for the year of 2021 for any additional projects that we would like to kind of see captured in that. So that's it for the update of the accessibility plan. We're pretty much right at 9 o'clock. I know I sent you guys the video over for the Stronach Recreation Complex. If anyone has quick comments, we can probably get that in today. Otherwise, we'll probably make that the priority when we look at the accessibility plan in May. Plus, I'll send you guys an additional building to take a look at, so we can probably hit 2 buildings at that same time. But that's it in terms of updates for the accessibility plan. Does anyone have any questions or anything they'd like to see added in based on my comments?
Your tool's good on the website. There's 2 things I've known. I know I'm nitpicking. So one, they're on the assisted recycling and garbage application.
Yep.
There is a double space between resident and physician.
Yep.
And there's no period after the word Town of Aurora. But other than that, it's good.
Thank you, Matt. And thanks for the check, Town of Aurora, period. And then can you repeat the first point? You said there was a space between which 2 words?
There's a double space between resident and physician.
Resident plus physician. Thank you, Matt. I will have that corrected. And thank you for taking a look so quickly. That's awesome.
And another thing is we should look at, so I know you just said we're about Read Aloud being renewed.
Yep.
A lot of the organizations have started using something called text help.
We just met with Text Help. So Text Help actually is the same company as Browsealoud. So Text Help, they were just speaking to us, and they provide so we use something called Site Improve, and so they do like the backend scanning and whatnot. So we use Site Improve. We sat down with Text Help. I wasn't overly sold on the product that they had. They had a couple of shortcomings. But we can take a look at it in a little bit more detail. But we did have a presentation from them fairly recently where I wasn't blown away by the product. But do you have personal experience using Matthew?
I have personal experience using something called Read and Write.
Read and Write.
So my college provides me a license key for that, and I found that when I had issues in February.
Mm-hmm.
I sent my technologist an email, and he sent an email to Text Help, and Text Help called within like an hour. So
I'm gonna take a look at Read and Write because I'm curious. I haven't seen their product yet, so I'm gonna explore theirs as well. Then
I think they are connected to Browsealoud is just our website version of Read and Write.
So Max was mentioning that he thinks they're all connected. Just Browsealoud is meant specifically for HTML format on the website, and then some of the other ones are like applications used. I'm just paraphrasing, but is that correct, Max?
Yeah.
you're probably right, Max.
Yeah, and then Max, you use WordQ, I think, for just your desktop applications, right? So that's another one that's out there as well. But thanks for bringing those up, Matthew. I'm going to take a research and see whether or not the Read and Write connection could work for HTML, or if that's just a software that you use for applications. I'm curious. Any other comments from the committee before we close up? Okay, So like I said, we'll take a look at the Stronach. It was a long video. It was like half an hour, but it's a little bit of a bigger building. And I didn't even catch like the whole exterior. That'll be like a part 2. Maybe that actually works and feeds well into next week, or not next week, next month's meeting, where we have the exterior, because we have the dome on the other side of it. We have some baseball diamonds. So maybe the next video, rather than taking a look at another building, we can save that for June. Maybe I'll do an exterior walk around so we can connect the SARC all into one meeting nicely over there from the exterior and the interior. So we'll take a look at that next time. But other than that, Rochelle, it's over to you, and then we can wrap this up.
All right, perfect. So, so if there's no further comments on our roundtable discussion, I'll call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that carries. And we have no informational items this evening. So that brings us to our adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Matthew.
Thanks, Matthew. And a second?
Joanne.
Thanks, Joanne. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that carries, and we're done.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, everyone. It was good chatting with all of you as always, and then we'll see you all in our May meeting. So have yourselves a great night, and we'll talk soon.
Have we decided on the date of that May meeting, or we're going to be told about it?
The May meeting's already scheduled. Linda, what's the date that we have in the calendar? I don't have it in front of me.
That's May 12th.
Definitely the 12th?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay then, thanks.
Thanks, Joanne. Alrighty, guys, have a good night. We'll talk soon.
Good night, everyone.